What's going on, everyone? MikeO back with another episode of Hobby Talk. It's been a while, been over a month, but I'm excited to be back. Looking forward to this episode where I'll be talking to Nolan Klein. Nolan runs cardboard futures on eBay. Great eBay page you can check out. Nolan can talk a little bit about that in a little while. He also is the owner of the popular YouTube channel Eliteco3. So with all that being said, very happy to bring Nolan aboard. Nolan, how you doing today?
Hey, Mike, how's it going, man? Great to be on the podcast and talk about the hobby today.
Yeah, it's always a good day when you get to talk about the hobby, and getting to talk to you about it is extra special. It's a lot of fun. We broadcast this on Soundcloud, iTunes, and YouTube. So we will be talking about the YouTube community and YouTube for sure later on, after we talk a little bit about investing in the hobby, grading cards, breaking wax. We're going to actually answer some questions from the YouTube community. I had posted a video earlier today before recording this, and we got a few questions, so we'll be answering all that. But before we get too involved in all the hobby discussion, Nolan, you want to talk a little bit about cardboard futures and your YouTube channel, Eliteco3?
So yeah, I've been selling on eBay for years and years now, and I've kind of grown the store and added more items as time has gone on, and kind of moved from a basic store up to an anchor, and I got a special deal on pricing to add more items, and basically I've just tried to to me, part of the fun I have in the hobby is being able to list a card, sell it, pack it, and then see the feedback of somebody getting a card that they wanted and see that they're happy. And I always place a lot of, I always complain about shipping, and I like to see cards shipped safely. So I spent a lot of time trying to build that store up. So I am proud of where it's at right now. And as for the YouTube channel, that's been, I've been doing that since 2010. So I just passed the 8-year mark on that. And it was kind of one of those things where when I first filmed the video, I thought, this is so weird. Why am I taping myself talking about my cards? And as time went on and I posted more and more videos, I was starting to get some more subscribers and people watching the content. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. There's other people out there doing this too. And it's just kind of grown, it's really picked up. I just hit 1 million channel views, which is nuts for me to think about. And, should be close to 3,000 subs soon. It's nice to have subs and people watching, but I don't get too obsessed with that. So that's kind of where I'm at in the hobby right now.
Yeah, when you had mentioned the other day, I was watching your video and you mentioned 1 million, and it's just like one of those numbers, and you're like, you stop there for a second and think about it, like 1 million. That's a big number to have people watch. But I think one of the beauties of YouTube videos, social media in general, Instagram has taken off, and Facebook, and even Twitter. There's all kinds of stuff. Like, there's a lot of information beyond just websites on social media about this hobby. But I've always found YouTube to be, you get a lot of personality out of it. And, there's variations in the type of videos out there, but a lot of them are very informative. Your channel is a shining example of that, where people can go and watch and they can get some entertainment and they can learn a lot about the hobby, and they can get ideas of cards they might want to collect or better ways to spend their money or whatever it is. But I just think it's great that people have that outlet to share what they have, and then people have that ability to then consume that information that people put out there. So I think it just works on both ends. So I do always encourage people to check out people making videos on YouTube. I think it's just a great way to kind of enhance the collecting experience and kind of grow knowledge beyond just running out to local shows and all that type of stuff. All the different ways you can kind of enjoy the hobby.
Yeah, I'm always looking for a new niche or something fun to do with the hobby. And I think as time has gone on, I've learned a lot from the people that watch my videos. They'll drop a comment into the comment section of a video, and I'll just kind of sit there for a second and be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So as much as I love to help collectors, I think they're constantly helping me too. And I love to go around and browse different channels out. It seems like in the past 2 or 3 months, we've had a lot of new people making content on YouTube. So it's been nice to see some new channels coming up. But it's just kind of like I have so much fun making the videos and seeing the comments and just kind of, t- letting people know that I am reading what they're saying, and it just works well on both ends.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun for sure. And just bouncing real quickly back to the eBay store, I think one of the great things about this time that we're in now, this digital age and being able to buy and sell online, as you know, and as I'm sure people out there listening know, this is a fun hobby, but it can be a very expensive hobby. Specifically, if you're breaking wax, which we'll get into at some point, but it's great to have an outlet to kind of turn some stuff over. And that doesn't mean you're not a collector if you sell some stuff. You know, you have people who this is their complete livelihood and they buy and sell, and that's fine. That's all part of the business. Without people doing that, you wouldn't have cards to purchase. But I think being able to have a store like that, you're able to, kind of have fun with the hobby, kind of pick up some stuff at good prices, sell it, like you said, give an experience to the buyer, provide a great service, and then in turn, you then have more funds to kind of invest in the hobby for yourself, for either your own collection or other stuff that you may want to sell. And it's an outlet if you do break wax to kind of sell off what you don't necessarily need for your collection. So I do think eBay's been a fantastic tool over the years, and I think eBay's struggling a little bit overall, just as a site because they have so much competition with Amazon and other retailers. But I do think it's probably one of the number one places to go, if not the number one place to go, looking for cards. I mean, it's still a huge outlet. I know there are other companies, but eBay and eBay stores are definitely a place to check out.
Totally. I think I want to touch a little bit on wax and breaking wax. And, the big question is always, is it worth it? And a lot of people know that honestly, I would say 75 to 85% of the time, you're probably going to lose money if you decide to break wax. But I think you have to take that with a grain of salt and weigh some of the positives that you get from the wax. Part of breaking wax is just fun. So you are paying, like when you go out to a baseball game, you're paying for the enjoyment, the entertainment aspect of it. And I think we get lost in, did I break even? Did I hit that big auto? Did I get, did I do well on this case? And yeah, it's great to break a good case and get some great cards, but I think there's a lot of fun that goes into breaking a case. And to me, it's fun to sort. It's fun to list, to sell. And I think that's what I have the most fun breaking wax doing that. And it's just, it's a topic that we could talk about for hours, people that don't break, that do break, people that say they're going to stop and then they start back up. So, and then back to this, selling cards on, my store on eBay. I think, the problem I see with it, the only problem I can see is there's just so much product out there that I think a lot of the stuff that I do list just gets lost in the shuffle. And that's just because there's so much competition, so many products each year, and there's only so much money to go around in the hobby, and there's only so many collectors that want this card or that card. So I think that's part of the struggle with selling on eBay.
And I do think eBay is and you can say this for the entire hobby, but eBay specifically is a very what have you done for me lately type of market. Of course, you have the vintage stuff, and that kind of the high end stuff is going to hold its price. You have a lot of other vintage, lesser known players that sometimes, if they go to auction, you can get at a complete steal. But the current day players, it's like, a guy's on fire for 2 weeks and the price soars, 200-300%, and then he has a 2 week stretch where he goes hitless, and those prices can drop incredibly fast. It's not a real stable market at times, especially for these the modern day players.
No, it's very. I trade futures, which is kind of like stocks. So I see a lot of volatility, stuff going up and down, and it's just kind of when I'm looking at sports cards, it's just they just are so similar when I see it. Like let's throw out a couple of players and use some examples, like Juan Soto, the Nationals 19-year-old player. His stuff is just really spiked recently, and a lot of people think it might be too late to hop on that train, but if he turns out to be the type of player that it looks like he could be, his base chromes could be $500-$600, and I think that might be where they're heading. But it's just kind of crazy how quick stuff can jump and move in this day and age of people with a laptop or an iPad in front of them and throwing down bids right and left.
Yeah, I mean, you can lay in bed and just bid on stuff on your phone. Like it's right at your fingertips. There's no doubt about that, and it's really interesting to see how player movement works. I guess what do you want to start with? Talking a little bit about investing in the hobby, like the Juan Soto thing, or breaking wax. Either way, they're kind of intertwined
Yeah,
a little bit. So
there are some products, baseball products that just came out. Topps Finest was a product that I almost bought a case of, but I just didn't do it. And then Topps Series 2 just dropped this week for baseball, and I'm a huge like just base. Give me a base rookie and I'll try to slab it, turn a $2 card into a $20 card, and I have a lot of fun doing that. And they made Gleiber and Acuna short printed, which I wasn't a huge fan of that, so that kind of turned me off. And I think they also made Shohei a short print too. So passed on that, but I'll probably end up doing some boxes just because I love basic tops. But I think back to the wax thing, I'm definitely gonna be buying some football products here soon as we get closer to summer. So I'll be busting more wax for sure.
yeah, I like basic Topps cards. To me, I just love the history of Topps and the evolution of that specific product. I'm a big fan when products last. I mean, there's so many products that come and go, and they make them for 2, 3 years, and then they disappear. So I'm gonna break a little bit of Topps for sure. I'll definitely break a blaster just for fun, and I think I'll probably break like a jumbo box. I'm not gonna go crazy with it, but I like putting together a few pages of a binder. I like to have a binder every year, and when I open a product, I'll put together 1, 2, 3 pages out of it, just with cards I like. Make some use out of it. Get that enjoyment out of breaking the product, going through the cards. I do think a product like Topps, even though there's a lot of commons in it, it kind of puts some names around baseball kind of in your mind, just watching it and going through it. So I like that. I'm a big fan of Topps Finest generally. I'm not saying that it's worth paying $140 or $150 a box at all, because I've opened a few boxes and they're nice cards, but they're tough this year. Fortunately, eBay had their 20% off sale a couple weeks ago, so there was, or a week ago, whatever it was. So there was some opportunity to get some Finest boxes at 20% off the going rate, so that wasn't bad. That's a tip to look out for if you're an
That's
eBay
a great
shopper.
tip.
eBay's been
Yeah,
doing a lot of deals, like way more often than they used to, which makes me think that they're really trying to get those sales numbers up a little bit. But
yeah, they really take care of their buyers and kind of leave the sellers out in the cold sometimes.
happens from time to time for sure. Um, but breaking wax, just in general, obviously you have these new products that come out, right? You have all these chasers and the hot rookies and all that stuff, and there's so many things in a product. There's colored parallels and autographs and one of ones, which they've overdone to death. Um, but that can certainly be fun and that can be expensive. But something that you've gotten really into, and I've really enjoyed watching and following, is when you get into some of the vintage breaks. You'll break products either from early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, whatever, um, if it's affordable. And I think that's something that I've gotten into from time to time. I haven't done as much as you. Um, but there is, some people will say, like, oh, that's junk wax. There's no value to it. Well, again, the value, it's how do you equate value? Because you have monetary value and you have entertainment value. And I think those products, and I'm guessing you'll agree, you get some entertainment value. You have fun breaking stuff from your youth, breaking stuff from when you were younger, kind of the nostalgic feeling, um, getting that. And then you do have some monetary value. I'm not saying you're not going to pull a $10,000 card, but you can kind of increase the value if you can find some candidates to have slabbed, grade it, increase some value there, and you can still get
Slab
some
cans.
rookies and stuff like that.
Totally. I that's kind of been one of my ventures here. It's probably been a couple of years I've been doing the older wax. I'll delve into the 80s. I usually stop around 1983, 84. It gets pretty pricey when you get to Tony Gwynn and Boggs' rookie year in 83. So I think if I'm paying $10 or $15 for a box from, say, a 93 Donruss box, there's still some cool cards you can pull from there. There's some Diamond Kings cards, which I think are great looking cards. And if you hit the right player and it's in the right condition, I mean, Griffey or Thomas, I mean, I've seen that Griffey sell for $40-$50 in a 10. So I mean, there's crazy value to be had in some of these junk wax products. I always obviously look out for the Hall of Famers, and I just kind of set a pile aside, and I'll just kind of, you don't want to just send stuff in to send it in. You want to have a purpose and kind of know what you're doing with the cards and the sets. And, if you can pull up a picture of the set and see what a PSA 10 looks like, and then kind of compare your copy to that. I do that sometimes. So I just think there's so much fun to be had, and there are ways to get some value out of those junk wax products. But I mean, the way products are now, I think, you could say that products coming out in 2018, there's a lot of junk wax out there. I mean, they make so much of it that I just have a fun time busting stuff that harkens me straight back to my childhood.
Yeah, and the old stuff can certainly more affordable. It's kind of amazing because I feel like this year and last year, they're generally out of control price-wise, these new products.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like 2 years
Totally.
ago, it's still pricey and expensive, but last year with the Judge craze was out of control, and I thought, all right, next year things will normalize a little bit. And then you had the Ohtani craze, which we'll see how long that lasts based on what kind of news comes out over the next 2 weeks, official news. But either way, you have Torres now with the Yankees and Acuna coming out in future products. The prices are still going to be astronomical. So you have to really decide and kind of, I'm someone who likes to not open every product, but open like a box of most of the kind of,
yeah, I think that's nice
the products that like
that.
Chrome, Fine, all that stuff where you get something. I like stuff like tier 1 and 5-star, and they make some beautiful cards, but at a certain point it's like, all right, $100 to most likely get two $5 cards. Generally speaking, you're definitely better off with singles. Those are the products that maybe I consider for group breaks occasionally if there's enough in it that I might want for a certain team. But I think that's a reason to look at some of the older stuff like you have, or even retail products. Retail, I prefer hobby, but certain products, Topps Chrome coming out this year, you might be better off doing some retail if you can find it at the right price.
Totally. If you're just looking for, you're not too obsessed with the autos and such, because I mean, it's going to be tough to pull a nice auto even out of the finest. I'm sure they'll get that watered down and produce a ton of product of that with the strong rookie class. So I think if you're just into some clean base rookies that you want to send off and get slabbed, I think there's a lot of value to be had from the retail this year. And a player that we need to mention Soto too. I talked about him a little bit before, but he's really starting to come into his own. He is 19. It's a small sample, but he might be the reason the Nationals balk on giving Harper, $250 million, $300 million. So I think this is an incredibly strong class of rookies. So I'm excited for some of the products coming out towards the rest of the year. But I'm with Mike in not breaking like 5-star and tier 1, because to go back to the when you're paying money to open cards up, it's not all about, okay, what can I get back? Was it a good investment? It's about having fun. And when you break a box and there's 5 cards in the box, it's a pretty short rush. You want your high, so to say, to last a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, and like I said, with the products like tops, like, so I kind of do everything in the hobby. There's not much that I don't at least dabble in. So when I break, say, a jumbo box of a 2018 Top Series 2, I'm going to open the box. I'm going to have fun going through the cards. I'll go through and pull out 9 to 27 cards, throw them in a binder, just toss them there. Then I'll go through and pull out a few that I can get autographed via TTM, or if there's any in person autograph opportunities. Then I'll go through and grab Phillies for my team set. Then I'll go through the inserts, and I usually just sell all the inserts because I don't really care about the basic kind of insert stuff. There's from time to time an insert set that interests me, but that's just not my thing. I'd rather have the base cards than you have the autographs. So I mean, I think it's what you're into, but for me, I have all those different aspects that I get enjoyment out of it. And now, my father, in the last year or two, we collected together when I was younger, and then he was out of it, and he just recently he retired a couple years ago, so now he's gotten into it a little bit again. So now I kind of get that opportunity to kind of open stuff with him a little bit once in a while, and next thing you know, you feel like you're like 10 years old again, opening opening some stuff. So that's why I'm pro opening wax. Now I understand it can be an addiction and you have to be smart. You can't buy 6 cases of something because you're going to get hammered unless you get really really lucky. But it's not gonna. It's generally speaking not going to happen. But like you said, um, it's all about what you can do with it. And like you, I will go through cards and see what I can get graded, and that's just like a whole nother process, which we'll talk about shortly. But that's just another aspect of what you can do with your break. You then have that challenge of going through things and seeing how you do with that, and that can add value, which can kind of be considered an investment in the hobby.
Totally. I think if you do know what you're doing, which I've seen your PSA orders, and you almost run the table, and I think you have ran the table a few times on like 50 or 60 cards, which is pretty incredible from somebody that sends off. So I think if you do know what you're doing, you have a good eye, maybe use some tools, get some lights involved. If you are breaking modern stuff and you do use the bulk option that PSA offers, you can really up the return of your boxes or your cases. If you know how to get PSA 10s, you know how to sell them and stuff. And you can also have a lot of fun. You can keep some, sell them. I think a lot of people just break their boxes and just kind of don't utilize that aspect in the hobby that can offer you so much. And that's what I found throughout the last. I've been slabbing since 2010 now. I think that's just something that all people that break wax or collect should know about. Grading, and if you like Beckett too, you can use Beckett. I just don't think there's as much value to be had with their service currently.
Yeah, and that's just another aspect of the hobby. And there's some people who just love their raw cards and they're totally not into grading, and that's fine. That's one of the great things about this hobby. There's so many things you can do. You can buy singles, you can buy wax, you can do a combination. You can collect cards in binders, you can collect just players, teams, sets, just randomly. You can collect autos, relics, rookies, Hall of Famers, current players, old players, pre-war, post-war. It's almost
Yeah.
endless. But let's get into grading a little bit. We'll talk about that since we briefly mentioned it. Obviously, you have some different options out there. You have PSA, you have Beckett, you have SGC. Um, Obviously, I think a lot of people out there listening to this know that we're both kind of definitely pro PSA. We both use PSA a lot. Do you have any thoughts on SGC?
They're actually my second favorite service currently. I've only sent to them once though, because all my stuff just goes to PSA. I have a good deal that I get on my large orders, but I do like their slab. I think they're consistent. Their pricing is pretty similar to PSA, and secondary value on PSA stuff, it it sells for a lot more than there's a big price increase when you compare like an SGC 98 to a PSA 10. So I have to go with PSA, but I think they definitely do great in the vintage card market too.
Yeah, there's no doubt people who do vintage, specifically pre-war, just love them. I don't mind their holders. I'm not in love with them like other people. A lot of people love the black border. It's okay. I guess it certainly works for certain cards. I think their holders it's a little wide, a little large for me, but overall it's
Yeah,
nice, and I think it is well respected. I don't really hear many people knock SGC at all. Beckett, on the other hand, you have a lot of people who love Beckett, and that's fine. I'm personally not a big fan of them. I don't like the holders. I mean, they're strong, which is good, but they just seem so clunky, bulky, pointy.
totally.
Um,
I think they have the strongest holder by far. But yeah, to me they're a little too big. And I just when I hold a PSA slab, it just feels right. And that sounds kind of weird saying it, but Beckett holder just I don't know, it doesn't feel right. And that's just a personal preference.
yeah, and it's definitely a preference. I do. So I like the option of being able to see why it got the grade, but I kind of wish it'd be nice if PSA had something where if you typed in the number, you could look at it on the site. I don't really need to see that on the slab itself. I actually think I kind of preferred when Beckett had it on the back, but
Totally.
either way, I don't know. I don't really necessarily. I take their grades kind of with a grain of salt. I've been thinking about making a video on it at some point. And it's not a big card. It's like
Yeah,
a
that'd be a great video.
It's a Chase Utley rookie card that I bought one time cheap, and it's a Beckett 9.5 gem mint. And I look at the card, and it's a black bordered Bowman card. I can't even remember what year it is. It must be, I don't know, 2000, 2001. I forget offhand. Um,
2001.
but it's got like this white chip on the right side on the edge, and I just look at it and it stands out so far, and I'm like, that's just not. It doesn't take me 2 seconds to say this is not what I consider a gem mint card. Like a gem mint card should look perfect for sure. Maybe there could be some minor flaw defect somewhere, but like I just look at it and I'm like, that's to me that's not a gem mint card, so it shouldn't be labeled as a gem mint card. But that's just kind of my thoughts on that. You know, people like Beckett, and it is what it is. People can enjoy it. I respect their authentication services for the autographs. I still don't like their cases that they use, but I don't know. The grading itself, I'm not a huge fan of.
Yeah, I think you can say the same for PSA. I've seen some PSA cards where I'll be at a show or I'll get one in person and it says PSA 10 gem mint on the case, and then I always take a look at the card too. Does the card match the grade that it got? And there's certain things that I like to see. Like you said with the Utley, if you have a gem mint card, you shouldn't have a crazy flaw like that. And I think Beckett. The problem I have with Beckett 9.5s is the 9.5, 9.5, 9.5, 9. So when you get one of the subgrades that has a 9, I think the flaw on those is too big to still have the card as a gem mint. Like you might have a 9 surface, and if I don't bust them out, but I'm sure there's like a scratch that it shouldn't warrant a gem mint card. Or if you get a corners 9 and if you check the back, I've seen a lot of these before, and the corner is just, it's not mangled, but it's just pushed in enough to where it's not a gem mint card to me. It's as collectors, we have to find cards that we truly feel match our perception or what we think a gem mint card is, and not just buy the slab blindly and totally trust the process, because people that are slabbing these cards are human, so they're definitely going to make errors. It's kind of like an ump in baseball. They don't make all the right calls, and I think people that are doing the slabbing, they have a tough job. Think of all the cards they have, and they're backed up. There's pressure on them. They're not going to get all these grades correctly. I mean, I've had PSA 9 cards that I still think are perfect, and they got the 9 and not the 10. I'm not going to cry and moan about it, but you just have those feelings still. And I think Beckett has also, I talk about this in my videos. I think they use like a niche to try to compete with PSA 10s, and they have the PSA 10 pristine slab, and those do sell for more than PSA 10s. And then I think they got a little greedy and they went for the black label slab, which is all 10s. So that's the black label. And they might be coming out with like a purple label soon, but I think they just create new niches to compete in the market.
Yeah, and they're definitely very popular, especially with the younger crowd. People love getting their autographed Bowman Chrome cards slabbed by them. So, I mean, it's all about what people like. I think PSA still is the dominant force in the grading realm. I think they're very well trusted. They've been around for a long time. I think generally people like their slabs. Certainly, their registries have really enhanced the value and the collectability of the PSA cards.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, registries are big. I know we have a question I think coming up from one of the listeners out there on that. So I'm not going to get too much into the registries, but in terms of grading, we already kind of mentioned it when we were talking about busting wax. But the thing about grading is it can add value to your collection. It can enhance your collection to a degree if you're into grading. Again, if you're not into it, you're not into it. But for me, when you grade a card, you kind of get that grade on it. And yeah, it can vary from time to time. I think overall they do a very good job with it. But like you said, they are human beings, so not everything's going to be perfect every time. But if you're into graded and slabbed cards, you're having that card encased, you're having it protected, you're adding eye appeal to it with the holder, you're adding the ability to register the card. And if you have a high grade, and it all depends on the era of card, of course. To me, like the very modern products, as in stuff this year, like for me personally, I want it as a 10. But as you go further back and cards get, handled over time, you accept lower grades. 9 can be fine too. To me, anything below a 9 for a brand new product is just not good at all. But there is certainly value to be added in your collection, and that's one of the reasons a lot of people enjoy grading. But it's also a challenge. It's fun. It's something to do. I like to tell people, because some people I'll see, they'll get a card graded and they'll come back like an 8, and they'll say, I pulled this right out of the pack. Well, in theory, it's brand new. So yes, like in theory, it should be perfect. But I think a lot of people who aren't used to grading don't realize, like, I open a lot of stuff, brand new stuff, and I will see surface scratches and scuffs or little bends. Like, just because you pull it out of a pack doesn't automatically mean it's a 10. So you definitely want to look over your cards. So that's part of it. You can add value, but you can really kind of lose value if you spend a lot of money and aren't smart about it.
Yeah, to jump on that point, there's a guy who made a video about a year ago, and he's kind of my hero because he sent in like 100 Griffey.
I watched that video at some point.
89 upper decks, and I think he said he pulled them all from packs, and he was just getting frustrated because he kept getting 6s and 7s. And I think the one thing that he forgot to do is first take a look at the cards. But cards that come, I bust a lot of that older junk wax product, and cards that come out of the pack, there's definitely no guarantee you're getting gem mint cards. The back of them can be creased. They can have scratches and scuffs, like you said. And I'm sure with those Griffies, there was something going on the back. It was probably like not like a crease, but something on the edge that was causing those to get those grades. So
even the holograms are really sensitive on those. You could lose a point or two on them.
That's something else I've seen. I've seen PSA 10s with like a chipped hologram, and if that happens to me, I just sell it because to me it's not a gem mint card. But I think back to the getting stuff graded. I think what people need to understand is if you are getting stuff slabbed and you don't get the grade you wanted, the card still has money. So this is kind of an example of something that happened in my store. So I do try to slab a lot of the older 90s wax, and it was a Ken Griffey Jr., just a base Donruss, right? This is a 25-cent card. And I was obviously going for a 10 on it, and it came back an 8. So I was like, okay. So I put it in my store. A couple of months later, it sells for $5.50. And that's about the price I paid to get a slab. So to me, I think people want the slab. They want it, like they're purchasing the slab and the card. They want the look of that. They want to add it to their PSA registry. So I think even when you don't get the grade that you sought after, there's so many times where you can still break even, and you get the enjoyment of those cards coming back, which is pretty much like Christmas morning as a 12-year-old when the cards do come back. So that's kind of my take on slabbing.
Yeah, and it's definitely a challenge. There's a challenge to it. So when you do get that back, like you said, you can be a kid on Christmas morning and you're excited to see how you did. Like, and I've gone through stages where I go crazy with it and I spend so much time looking over things and it usually pays off, but then I think to
You got to
myself,
tell me about your
ha,
process.
I think
Give me
to
the
myself how many hours I spend looking at stuff. But then
okay.
but then on
I
top
don't
of
spend
that,
enough
like
time.
sometimes I'll sit there and go, how many tens did I throw back in the box? So
Yeah,
you
totally.
gotta like I've lightened up a little bit, so you'll see a few more come back recently that have been nines. But like you said, there is still value to them. It's just if it's new, usually I mean you spend a lot of money getting this done, so usually anything that's not a 10, like I'll get a lot of Mike Trouts done, just base inserts, whatever. I like collecting Trouts, so if I can get some 10s for my collection, I'll keep them. If I get nines, I'll usually just sell them and you either get your money back or maybe a couple bucks more or whatever, but it's just a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
totally.
It's definitely a challenge. It doesn't obviously, even with the new products, of course, it's easier to get a 10 than it is for a product that's 10, 20, 30 years old, for sure. There's no doubt about it, but it's still not guaranteed. And that's what I like to kind of let people know. Because I feel like some people will watch your videos and be like, man, you got all these 10s. And it's like, you can get 10s too. You just have to look at them. I just tell people, I'm like,
Yeah, you
listen,
just have to spend some time on them.
I look at the centering, both sides. I look at the corners, both sides. I look at the edges. I look at the surface, pretty good. And you do want decent lighting. You don't want too much light, but I have a few camera lights and I'll just flip them on so you get a nice, as long as you don't have the glare. And I mean, I'm personally used to looking like into great detail for stuff. So I think some people think they're being detailed when they look at things, and then they just kind of roll over a lot of stuff, and that's how you can miss things. Um, but it's a challenge. It's fun, and there's certainly there's value to be added to your collection, no doubt about it, with grading. So it's something that I'm into. It's not for everyone, but it's definitely for you and me. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, this from a person that buys a lot of cards raw, and tries to find slab cans or cards to get graded. I think the sweet spot for buying cards raw is the stuff that cards that are sell for $20 or less. I think when you get higher than that, the cards have been picked over, looked more closely, and I have a really, really hard time buying like mid-end cards and actually having like a solid candidate that can even get like a 9. So that's why you won't see as many mid-end or high-end orders from me. And a lot of times when I do send those in, I'm just trying to get the card slabbed and protected, and that's why you'll see me pull a lot of 8s and 7.5s. And to me, it doesn't bother me because it's protected, and I didn't have high expectations. Like I've always used that term in my videos. Like I didn't have a high expectation for this. Like if I didn't expect a 10. I knew there was no way I was going to get a 10. So when the 8 comes back, I'm totally fine with it. And you can't expect a 10 on every card and a lot of the stuff I send in, they're pretty challenging sets. So a lot of times I'm stoked to get a 9. So that's just kind of my whole sentiment on it.
Yeah, and I know you were buying a lot of the Stanton Topps Chrome rookies because I was buying some back in the
Mm.
winter time, and I would look them over and I want to get a 9 on one of these. And needless to say, I didn't even send a single one in because I think those cards are just, I guess that's what, 2010 is Topps Chrome.
2010.
Yeah, they're
They
very
That was
sensitive.
a year.
Lot of scratches on
Top.
those.
Their quality control in 2010 was not very good. 2010 Bowman Chrome, I always talk about this in the videos. It's got like a filmy residue. Like even if you try to get the surface clean, it's not that it's scratched. It's just that it doesn't get totally clean, and that's just the way the chrome is that year. And with the Topps Chrome Stantons, yeah, I probably have picked up 10 to 15, and I think I'm only sent in one because they're either off centered or they're just the surface is it's going to be an 8. You just know it's going to be an 8.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough set. Forget. I think I bought a few refractors and 5 or 6 of the base cards, and I was just like, they're probably 8s at best, so I didn't send them. Uh, Talking about Stanton a little bit, we talk a little bit about investing in the hobby, and um, there's a lot of ways to collect and things to invest if you're into that type of thing. I mean, you can collect and invest at the same time, and you can collect things. I collect a lot of Phillies cards that are worthless to the majority of people out there collecting, but to me, they're nostalgic, they're memories, they connect me to family and friends and all kinds of stuff like that. So, that's why we collect, for fun and enjoyment. But investing can be fun too. And there's a lot of things you can invest in. Obviously rookie cards are very popular, and vintage cards are popular because they're part of this hobby, but they're also antiques, and there's, so very few that are in great condition because they were just seen as toys and tossed away and beat up and all types of things like that. But I think something that adds value to certain players is, of course, them becoming Hall of Fame players, becoming legendary players, becoming nostalgic players that people like to collect. And popularity is obviously a big thing. I think, Nolan, everyone kind of respects your opinion on hobby investment. You kind of show off a lot of stuff. You get into different players. You've been into players in the past. I think you've readily admitted that you're not always right, but you're pretty good overall. I forget who you were mentioning lately. I don't know if it was like a running back or something, or you were talking, or no, maybe it was Robert Griffin III.
Robert
You were
Griffin?
talking about at one point. You're
Oh,
like, yeah, that was a mistake.
that was actually my worst investment of all time. It was the summer of 2013 after his rookie year. So I bought an exquisite 3-color RPA for 900. I think I sold it for $75. So, I mean, that's a crazy, crazy burn. And, obviously there's been great investments that have made up for that. But that's just a warning to all collectors out there to not go nuts over these rookie players, unless you think for sure they're going to be great, which there's no way to know for sure. So just kind of temper your expectations with guys like Wentz, even though I think he's going to be pretty special.
Yeah, and you don't have to go and buy $900 cards. I know you've been buying a lot of Lindor cards, pretty cheap, like $3 a piece or something, or maybe a little more. But
oh yeah,
I mean, there's a lot
I
of
think those.
deals out there that you can kind of look at and evaluate and go, okay, what does this guy's future look like? And you can kind of, you can invest at a reasonable price, and you can diversify your investment too with a few different players, and hopefully a couple guys pan out. But there's a lot of options out there. So do you have any kind of advice for people?
This goes to people that are prospectors. It's a very tough game because there's only so many kids that can make it to the show. So I think you can set some rules for yourself, like I won't spend more than $20 on a base chrome auto, or $15, and that can kind of help you from spending too much on players that have already moved up. Everybody wants to buy the next Trout chrome auto. I think those were going for like $30 or $40 when it came out. That's not going to happen. So one of my successes was Francisco Lindor, summer of 2015. I think he was about to get called up, and his chrome auto was his base chrome was $25. So I scooped up about 20 of those. And I think now it's over a $200 card. So it's nice when you don't have to spend, too much on a player, and they do go up. Obviously I've spent $20 on a chrome auto, and now it's worth $3, and that happens too. But for guys that have already moved up too much, like I think Vlad Jr., I'm not touching his chrome auto at $600-700. I think that's nuts. Ronald Acuna, that ship sailed. So you can kiss some of those guys goodbye. Albies at 100, 120. Maybe I'll buy a couple. It still seems kind of high, but I think that kid's going to be special.
What's fascinating is, specifically in the case of Vlad Guerrero Jr., his dad is a Hall of Fame baseball player. He's going to be officially inducted shortly. And yet, his son, who's never played in the majors, stuff is so insane. It's crazy. I had a guy, I saw people, they were selling like PSA DNA certified Guerrero things, and it's like, I could buy a Vladimir Guerrero Senior for like $40, and you want like $300 for a guy who never played in the majors. It is insane. And I'm not saying the kid can't be special. He obviously looks like he's going to be phenomenal, but I think people, like you said, they want to find like the next Mike Trout. They want to find the next card that they're going to spend $20 on and be able to sell for $3,000,
3,000 or
5,000,
something. Yeah,
God
exactly.
knows what. And I
And
think it's just kind of crazy when you when you sit back and look at it. Like it's just absolutely ridiculous. But people love that thrill. They love the thrill of kind of the unknown and what things can be. And I feel like that's what happens with a lot of guys. Like guys are real hot when they're young, and then at some point people go, "Oh, this guy's not going to be the greatest of all time." And that's when they kind of their prices deflate a little bit. And then they become affordable. And then at some point, 15, 20 years down the road, people go, "Oh, that guy's going to end up getting elected to the Hall of Fame." So it starts to rise a little bit. People get into it a little more. And then eventually people realize, okay, this guy's done something special. So then maybe the prices will elevate again a little bit. But the prospecting kind of game can be interesting. And, if you have a connection with a player, it's not bad to invest in them and buy them. But I feel like there's a lot of people who have never seen a guy play, and they just kind of go nuts on a guy just based on hearing their name. I mean, I've seen it with a lot of the Phillies prospects, and I'm not really super into prospecting guys that I've never seen play. But most of the Phillies' recent draft picks, like the first-round picks, I mean, they've done okay with later-round picks, second round and beyond. But like Mickey Moniak, like he really hasn't done much of anything. I mean, he's played a little better lately. And they've had countless others that, I mean, I remember seeing Mickey Moniak cards going for like $400, and I'm like, this guy's not going to be in the majors for at least 4 or 5 years. You could just tell he wasn't the type of guy who was like going to be up at 19. And
he
then,
have
and then he starts hitting like 230
speed?
in single A, and then you just see the prices just slowly drop.
Yeah, the thing with him is, just to touch on that real quickly. Does he have speed? Is he a fast guy? Can he steal bases?
I haven't even looked at his numbers lately. When they were drafting him, they acted like he could be this 5-tool guy, but
Yeah, it's just like,
I don't know. He just hasn't really hit for much power or average, and I
I'm
don't know
just
how
gonna
the
pull up the
defense
stats
has
real
been.
quick.
So
Okay, so he's hitting 254 with a 272 on base, 209 at bats, 1 home run, and a 272 on base. To me, that has bust written all over it, because he's got the Jurickson profile problem here. He can't really steal bases. He has no power, and he can't get an on base percentage. It's a recipe for disaster. The thing he has going for him is he's only 20, and he's playing in high A, which is a pretty good level for his age.
yeah, another guy was Cornelius Randolph. They drafted a few years ago, and I remember the day they drafted him, and like I didn't know anything about him. I don't really follow college baseball too much nowadays. And I just remember when they drafted him, people were like, he has a chance to be Tony Gwynn. And I can tell you one thing, he ain't going to be Tony Gwynn. So
Yeah, and I don't want to get into the Royals, and they've probably been the worst drafting team in the last 7 or 8 years, and that's why they're in the hole that they are right now. But yeah, I think people just get too hyped up on these kids. Like Vlad, back to Vlad Jr. I've seen his highlights. He looks like he's going to be very, very good. It's just, do you want to spend that much on a kid that hasn't done anything in the pros? I don't know. It's all like people wanting to spend 600-700 and hoping the card's worth $2,000 or $3,000, if that makes sense. Which, the odds are it's not going to be.
yeah, and if you have the money, by all means do it if that's your thing. But I think you're probably better off making some $20 investments. But that's the thing with prospecting. You just never know. It can be fun, but you can hit on the right thing. Just want to wrap up kind of talking about investing in the hobby a little bit, because there's certainly investments to be made. So if you want to give a few thoughts, baseball, football wise, I think baseball wise, in most cases, you want the guys to be a Hall of Fame caliber player. You have some guys like a Don Mattingly who holds some value. He's not going to have the value of other guys who are all-time legends, but he has a lot of popularity being with the Yankees, being like an idol of a lot of people who grew up. Football-wise, though, obviously you have occasional defensive players, certain wide receivers. Running backs nowadays seem a lot more iffy, but I mean, I think with football, it's probably kind of all in the quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think now it's kind of the way the league's set up. The quarterback's so important with the way that passing yards have trended up the last 5 to 7 years, and I think they've kind of they haven't phased out the tailback. He's just not as important. The 2017 class did have a resurgence with some good players like Alvin Kamara, McCaffrey, Hunt, and there were some others. I just think if you're gonna, it's almost impossible to invest in a tailback because the shelf life's so short. And if you are going to buy a tailback, you almost have to get those cards moved within a year. And that's if you care about the investment part of it. If you don't, keep them. But I mean, you're looking at paying $50 for an auto of Kareem Hunt now, and in 5 years it being worth $5 to $10. And that's just I've seen it so many times with so many players. I could just go down the list. Darren McFadden in 2008, Larry Johnson 2003 rookie, 2002 Portis. I mean, you can just go year by year, and the only people I can say that didn't happen to is Tomlinson in 2001 and Peterson in 2007. Although yes, his stuff has dropped a lot, but it does still have value.
Yeah, and the last two you mentioned will be Hall of Famers, or Tomlinson already is, but that's the case there. They go down as legendary guys. And of course, Peterson's in a down spiral right now because he's bouncing around different teams. He's kind of out of sight, out of mind, but I think there'll be a resurgence at some point. Not a crazy one, but I think he'll gain collectability once he's not, an active player, in all honesty, kind of putting on jerseys. He's one of those guys that just doesn't look right in a non-Vikings uniform. But running back wise now is so tough because they're splitting carries, or like you said, that they're just in and out of the league in 3-4 years, or out of relevance, really. I mean, you went through that stage where you had, those greats like Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith, and then, you kind of have new classes come by, but it seems like kind of been missing the greats, the long-term guys, the guys who put up the crazy numbers in recent years. So it's really shifted to those quarterbacks. And of course, it's become a passing league. So you have the Brady, which is, not something you're going to see every day because he has a ton of rookie cards. But, one of the things with him, it can be tougher to find the really well-kept cards because he was tossed in a lot of common boxes in all fairness. And then you have guys like Breeze and Rodgers who are surefire Hall of Famers and people mention in, top 10 lists and stuff. And then you have other classes of guys. So it does seem like the quarterbacks are the way to go, but still it kind of depends what you want to put your money in because no quarterback's a guarantee for sure. I mean, you have guys like Robert Griffin III who are on top of the world and people are talking about as, is he one of the best? And next thing you know, he's in training camp, competing for a backup spot.
Yeah, totally. I think the smart money is on quarterbacks and then probably wide receivers. There is some hobby on the defensive side of the ball for certain players like Palomalu, Ravens safety Ed Reed. There is some hobby there for select defensive players. Offensive linemen, I mean, there's not much hobby there at all. So I think your best bet is to buy quarterbacks that have been in the league for 6 to 8 years, have established themselves, are on track to probably be a Hall of Famer. Like current quarterbacks, I think you could start to buy would be like Matt Ryan. I think he'll probably be a Hall of Famer. Rivers, Eli, Roth. I mean, these are all pretty not like tough finds for people, but I think people think too hard sometimes when they're investing in football cards. I mean, I think Breeze and Brady are still great buys. I think they only have room to go up in the future as they pad their stats and get more records.
Yeah, it's incredible how many quarterbacks can be out there. And like you said, people do try and overthink things, and they're trying to get the bargain before it goes crazy. I know Derek Carr stuff was flying up at one point, then it kind of regressed. I'm not sure where it is now. I think the Raiders added some weapons for him, but people are trying to jump on that guy before. I mean, now you have Jimmy Garoppolo, who has looked really
I
good,
was about to mention his name.
but what's he played? Like, he started like 2 games,
6 games,
a game and a half in New England, and 6 games for San Francisco, and his stuff is like ridiculous.
Mark my words, his stuff will be much lower this time next year. I mean, I don't know how he can sustain that. He's gonna have to go like 13-3 and be an MVP candidate to keep those hobby prices. I think he's driven those older football products like 2014 stuff, and I don't have anything against him. It's just people go nuts. They need to temper their expectations and not freak out. Like Jimmy Garoppolo's not Tom Brady. He started like 8 games. He's done pretty well, but let's just calm down sometimes here. But I mean, it's up to the collectors. If they want to spend that, spend it. I'm not going to stop them, but it's like throwing money into a fire.
Yeah, just hoping for the best. What do you think is more collectible in terms of value wise? Do you think football or baseball? Because it seems like some of those football, the like high end rookies are maybe a little higher, but I feel like there's more predictability in baseball a little bit, if that makes sense.
Man, yeah. I would say that it's probably a push to me because I've had so much success with guys like Brady, Breeze, and Rodgers, and I know those are the class of the pro football, but I think it's kind of like you don't need to buy vintage football, but you just need to be smart with the players that you do buy. So I would stay away from the rookies unless you can get somebody cheap that you think has a good future and you're not spending crazy amounts for their cards. But going back to baseball, I think my biggest hits in baseball have been, I did good on the Francisco Lindors, and I've done pretty well with some of the vintage. But I think I've done better in football cards.
Have you kept up with the Mike Trout market, like his Topps update?
Yeah.
I just looked at it the other day, and I was like,
"What's it raw now? Is it 200?"
I don't know. I just saw PSA 10s were going for like 500 to 600, and I was kind of stunned.
Those were just about 350, right?
Yeah, I think in the off season, I picked one up for like 280, and I had like eBay bucks, so I got like $28 back on eBay bucks. And I mean, he's obviously having a great season, so I was just curious. I just looked and I was like, wait, what? Should have bought 10 of them.
Yeah, totally. I think that's like right now we're June 14th, so I think if you're gonna buy some football cards, do it right now. Don't wait till August. Stuff's gonna be creeping back up as the hype starts for camp and stuff. So I think it's a great time to get some football cards in, grab some Brady's or Rodgers cards. I think they're going to definitely be a little bit cheaper in the off season. The same goes for baseball. Come December, January even, grab some baseball cards, buy stuff in the off season. It's not always that much cheaper. I think people make a bigger deal about that than it really is, but it is lower a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think it depends what it is. Obviously, if it's like a top-notch, top-of-the-market card, it's going to fluctuate a little bit. I will say, I think there are a lot of it's a tough time of the year for a lot of people, but I think there's a lot of great deals to be had right after Christmas because generally speaking, a lot of people spend a ton of money, so they're not really in the market to buy stuff. And baseball-wise, you have the football postseason coming up, so people are in on that. So there are a lot of great deals I've seen that you can get on baseball. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you're going to get great vintage stuff or even the top-notch rookies, but if you're into just collecting lesser-known players or even autographs of different guys, I have noticed you have some opportunities for a couple weeks there. And I remember last year seeing Dodger stuff after they had lost the World Series, and you were that part of the year. I remember seeing some Dodger stuff just going so crazy cheap. I was like, man, people just definitely don't want to be buying stuff. They're just not thinking about it. They're trying to avoid like remembering that they lost. So I think there's opportunities sometimes with stuff like that.
I'm gonna ask you a question about a player. How do you feel about Judge as an investment long term? Then I'll give you my answer.
I mean, long term, I don't think it's great. I think there's probably So his stuff, I mean, I haven't studied it real well, but I glanced at a few things, and I know his stuff is down from last year. That's not saying it's not selling well, um, but it's just down because the hype is on Otani and Albies and Acuna and Guerrero, all the current guys. So I wouldn't I wouldn't go and invest a ton of money in it, but I do think if you can get decent prices, I think there's potential short term value for it to add should the Yankees reach a World Series, get there. If people are high up on the Yankees, if he has a big World Series, which is a big if, because he's the type of guy who could hit 6 home runs or he could strike out 19 times and people just want nothing to do with them. Long term, I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I understand there's a lot of Yankees fans out there and a lot of people enjoy it, and the guy's been incredible. But he is a big frame guy. He is a little older when he came up. I think he's 25, 26. And yeah, I've seen it with some guys before that their body just breaks down. Like he's not the type of guy who's going to be real effective at 38. You'd be lucky if he's really effective to 33. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think if you're spending like 5, 6, 7, $800, it's probably not good. If you're buying $10 rookie cards, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, totally. I'm kind of I'm definitely agree with you on some points about his size and the way he's built. And I think Nate Tops 85401 kind of touched on this in a video last fall, but he's 6'5", 6'6", about 285. I think it's just going to be tough for him to be as effective as he is now. I mean, even if he's not quite to that level, he could still be a good player. But I think he's got about 5, 6 years of productive years in him. I think he's going to start to slope downwards. And, I'm kind of with you. I don't think it's wise to spend a ton of money on him, but we could be totally wrong, and he could be a 600 home run guy. I don't think that's going to happen because of his age. I think he's already 26. So he kind of came up late.
You never know. I think the thing that he has going for him, and that's kind of what my point with the short term, like he could have spikes here and there, is the fact that he's a Yankee. That is huge. If he played for the Detroit Tigers, his prices would already be probably half of what they are now, if not even lower. So I think, if the Yankees go on a run here, which is possible because they have a hell of a lot of really good offensive players, if they get enough pitching, I mean, they look like the type of team, and they have to compete with Boston. They maybe could reach the World Series 3-4 times in the next few years. I mean, I think there's room for growth on him potentially, but, I still don't think it's wise long term. I mean, I think Cody Bellinger stuff's really cheap, and he still has a lot to prove too. But, I mean, contrary to Judge, he's only 22. Now, will he be able to keep up the productivity of last year? I don't know. I mean, he's got 12 homers this year, but, I mean, he's a guy who's 22 years old. He has 51 career home runs. It all depends on what kind of pace he keeps, but, I've agreed with points that you've made in the past where, you want to look at the guys who are a little younger, and just because you're younger doesn't mean you're going to be a better player. You can fall off a cliff too. But I think if you're looking for long-term, the guys who are younger, they're going to have more opportunities to kind of build on that resume.
Exactly. Guys that can, have a chance at 3,000 hits or 450, 500 home runs or, hitting those milestone numbers. I think it's, guys like Lindor and Correa who both came up young. Correa, I think he was only 19 and Lindor was about 21. So I think, guys like that, they have a chance to build their resume up so much more. And I think they're so much more appealing than a guy that gets called up at 25.
Yeah, and again, if Judge dominates for 10 years, just because you come up older doesn't mean you don't have a shot at being a Hall of Fame player. It just decreases your overall odds. I mean, if he dominates baseball for 10 years and, the Yankees win 3-4 World Series, he plays a big part in 2 or 3 of them, he hits 400 home run, like he can still be a Hall of Fame player. It's just the likelihood is, I mean, I've seen it with a guy like Ryan Howard, and, I think Judge probably a little better than Howard, but, I mean, Howard had a few really good years, but then eventually he got hurt, and he just never recovered, and his stuff is, like, insanely cheap now. I mean, you could basically have people giving it away, but Obviously, I'm going to harp on the Phillies a little bit because I kind of watched his entire career. But you look at Ryan Howard, and when he came up, I mean, he was a 300 hitter, he hitting 50 home runs. I mean, he was really good, but he just couldn't adjust to the shift. He couldn't stay healthy, and his numbers really dwindled after about, I don't know, I want to say like 3 really good years. He just, you know, and that's what you have with some of these bigger guys, where if those numbers fall off significantly, they're probably not going to recover.
Yeah, I'm taking a quick look at his stats. In 2006, he was 58 with 149 RBIs, and he won the MVP. So he had a couple more good years, and like you said, he tailed off and stopped playing at 36. So I mean, he had a great career though, 382 home runs. So that's a good career.
No, you'll certainly take that. I think that's a thing that we lose.
Yeah, that's
We
an
lose in
awesome
the
career.
hobby sometimes because people want the Hall of Famers. They want the guys with the massive value, and sometimes you have to take a step back and be like, that dude was a really good baseball player. He wasn't
Yeah,
one of the best of all time, but he was really good for a while, and made had some big seasons, made a lot of memories for people, and played a big role in a lot of games. So you can say that about just so many players out there. And guys just wear out, guys fall off.
totally. It's hard to be effective forever.
No doubt. So we've been yapping for a while, and it's been a lot of fun. You have a few minutes to answer a few questions from viewers or from listeners of the podcast.
All right.
So I had made a video on YouTube and asked people to, provide some questions. So I'll roll through some of them. We'll give kind of our thoughts on it. First up, we have coming from Matt, who is Passion for Cards on YouTube. He wants to know how we determine what we do and don't grade. Like, when is it cost and time effective to prepare, send, grade? When does when does all that effort outweigh the benefits of getting it done?
I would say with that, have a plan in place on stuff that you want to get slabbed. Is it stuff you're going to keep? Is it stuff you're going to, try to flip for 10, 12 bucks? You just kind of have to know the price of the secondary market and stuff that you are slabbing. If a card in a PSA 10 sells for 8, 9 bucks, I mean, the best case scenario is if you do sell it, you're going to break even. So is that worth it to you? Are you grading it to keep it? It's all about the set, and if you are going to keep the card, to me, I think you can touch on that a little bit too.
Yeah, I think, if it's a player you like, a player you collect, it's not going to necessarily have great value, but it'll be worth it from that perspective because you're doing it for your collection. For me, I like to do stuff as I go. When I open a product, I kind of like to pull out certain rookie cards, maybe a few inserts here and there of certain players, and I like to just go through them. And with the modern stuff, with stuff like that I know is not going to command super high prices, that's where I try to be kind of picky. And I'm just like, you know what, if I see something right away, I'll just toss it aside. If I see whether it's off center or a scuff, but it is time consuming. It takes a lot of time to prepare the orders, to pick out the cards, to evaluate the cards. And, there's certain guys that, you can kind of prospect that way. You pull out some rookie cards and think, okay, this guy looks like he's having a good season. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. You have a guy like Alex Bregman last year. He's not real expensive, but they were in the World Series last year, so there was a demand for them. So he was worth doing it last year to me with a lot of the products. And then you have a guy like Yoan Moncada, who I got stuff graded and have been kind of waiting for him to maybe at some point break out or get some attention, and that just kind of hasn't happened to this point. So I don't know. I'll just I just usually have players in place and that's kind of my plan, either players or that's kind of how I go about it.
Yeah, like when I'm grading cards, it's always in tiers. Like, cards that are only worth 50 cents to $1, which we often get slabbed. A card like that, I want it to look perfect when I send it off. Now, a card that I paid $20, $25 for, I'm a lot more less strict on those. If it has a corner that's not perfect, I'll still send it. It's all about to me, it's all about how much did I spend on the card? How much is the card worth? A card that, say, $150 card that looks pretty good, I'm going to send it just because I want it slabbed.
All right, our next question is coming from It Cometh a Egg there on YouTube, and he wants to know if you get modern cards back from PSA that are under a 9, do you crack the card out of the case or keep it raw? For me personally, I have never cracked the card I got graded out of the case. I have bought a few autographs that were authenticated by a different company, and I cracked them open and sent them off to PSA DNA. Um, but to me, if I get something that I'm not happy with, I usually just sell it cheap, get some money back for it, let someone add it to their collection, because a lot of people just want it slabbed and they'll accept an 8 or a 9 or whatever. I don't think I've ever gotten anything under an 8, but I don't know if you've
Well,
really ever cracked anything or if you think it's worth it.
um, you know, I'm I've had a few of those sixes and stuff. So it's just when you totally miss something on the card, and if it's like a six, I'll snap it. But aside from that, I'll just sell like sevens and eights. And a lot of the time, what I was talking about before, a lot of people just want to buy the slab and want to have a card that's authenticated by PSA, and you really won't do too bad on it if you just put it on eBay and just wait for a little. Don't put it in auction. It's going to go for 99 cents plus shipping. Just wait, be patient, get $5-6 back for it, and move on to the next card.
Got a few questions on the National here. Those back pages thinks it would be cool if we spread the word about the National and how important it is for collectors to at some point attend a National. And then Dave's Midlife Card Crisis thinks that a National podcast needs to happen, which I agree on, and I've thought about, Dave. I would like to do it. I don't currently have a laptop that's not 12 years old, so if someone has a laptop, I can bring out some other equipment. And I have been thinking for a while that it would be neat to do a live podcast from the National, but it all kind of depends on how time plays out, because you go into a National thinking you're going to have 3-4 days, and then you go to the show, and then you hang out with people, and then next thing you know, the National's over. So you got to plan well ahead of time to do that.
Yeah, I think it'd be definitely be awesome to get all the YouTubers together and do a podcast with all of them. I have a laptop that's about 5 or 6 years old that I could bring out there, and we could get some other people together. It'd definitely be a lot of fun, though.
It would be interesting. So it's a possibility. We're not going to announce anything definite, but it would be interesting. What's the worst product of 2018? Matt Lavender wants to know. I don't know if there's been
baseball.
Yeah, I guess I guess football just started coming out. What's come out? Score and like
Yeah,
Luminescence or
I'm not gonna.
something.
Yeah, the worst product of 2018. God, I'm trying to think of what I truly think is the worst product that's come out so far. I don't know. It's probably like tier 1. Honestly, I don't know. And I'm only saying that because it's so expensive. What do you think, Mike?
I haven't really had a problem with any of the base releases, like Tops, all that stuff, Gypsy Queen, Heritage. I think they are what they are. I do think knowing that you have these other rookies like Torres and Acuna coming up, I think it kind of hurts the early season products, because now people are going to be chasing those players who aren't in them. But I haven't had a lot of problems with the products. I haven't done much tier 1. I usually like those cards, but I certainly don't think they're worth breaking based on what I've watched in a few breaks. So we'll see. There's still a lot of time left in the year. I'm sure a stinker will fly through at some point.
Well, yeah, if you count the products that don't have the logos, I'd say like Diamond Kings, but it's that's in the running. Definitely any product made by Panini for baseball, because there's no logos.
See, I didn't even think those. So like, I'm not into the Donruss product. I know a few years ago I liked the Donruss football, but the Donruss baseball I can't do. They have like 8,000 variations, and they like weird. They just have so much weird stuff. So I'll vote for Donruss 2018 baseball.
Yeah, all right. We can agree on that.
Yeah, that's just weird. I can't even do it. Pepino Man, the legend himself, wants to know what the lowest grade we've ever received on a card. Thinking it was a 10. If we sent something in, we thought it was a 10, and it came back. What's the lowest grade you've ever gotten?
Truly thinking it's a 10. I think a 5. I think I've gotten some 5s, and like on the back, surface. I think there was like a crease that I didn't see, and I thought it looked perfect. That's happened more than once to me. I'm not as uh, clean of a grader as Mike, but I try to do my best.
I think I gotten eights before, but I mean, they were like not difficult cards to grade, so I don't know what I missed on them. I think I had a what's his name, T.J. Watt. I think just like a regular optic card that I was like, if it's a 10, it might be okay next year. He's popular with the Steelers, and it might have either came back an 8, maybe it came back a 7.5, I forget, but I remember just being like, I missed something. And
Yeah.
speaking of Mickey Moniak, I know I got an 8 on some card of him one time, and I was like, well, that card's now $1 probably. We got a few coming in from Chris Joyce. If a collector were to have a highly coveted one-of-one card graded, would the value stature of the card be hurt by a low grade? I personally would say probably yes. I don't know that a one-of-one's really worth getting graded unless it's a 10 if it's a modern product. I mean, I guess a 9 would be considered acceptable. Otherwise, I mean, unless you really just want to have it slabbed, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a thought on it.
Yeah, I've actually had some one of one slabbed, and to me, I don't think anything less than a 9 is worth it. I think when you get an 8 or an 8.5 or anything lower, you're taken away from the one of one aspect of the card. Having that one of one is kind of the main thing with the card, and then a grade is kind of like gravy. So if you're getting a 7 on it, I think it looks bad.
And then Chris also wants to know if you snap a low graded card from its case to sell or trade raw, do you feel a moral obligation to disclose that it was previously graded? I mean, I've never snapped a card because I've never had a card that I thought was worth doing that with, but maybe you can speak more to that.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think you have to. There's been times where I've snapped a card and taken a close look at it. And my thing, if you buy from my store, if there's like a major flaw, I'll always put it in the list. I'll put like has a crease on the back of the card or has a very bad surface scratch. But if you're breaking out at 7 or 8 and you take a look at it and it looks like a near mint card, that's what the people that are buying are looking for, I think you're fine. But I think when the cards are flawed and you don't tell that to the buyer, you're not being nice to the buyer who expects a card that's not in terrible condition.
And then he's also asking what our thoughts are on raffles because they're big in the hobby. People love to, sell 10 spots for a card and do that. I don't know if you really practice that much. I don't know. I know it's big. I know it's big.
Raz deal.
What's that? Yeah, Raz. People are big into that in the Facebook groups. I mean, I've bought some spots before. I've never actually sold cards that way. So I mean, it's kind of like group breaks in a way.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing. It's actually a decent way to get stuff moved, and I think if people want to buy the spots and the person selling it is getting paid and they want to get some stuff moved, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as long as you're doing it in a trustworthy group or with a group of people or someone I think it's just another way to kind of have a little fun with the hobby. As long as you're not spending crazy amount of money on it, you can potentially add a really nice card to your collection that you otherwise maybe couldn't afford. So again, it's all about who you deal with. You should know who you're dealing with. Christopher Brown, when it comes to grading cards, Chrome specifically, when it's sent in, do you agree with the suggestion not to mail them in magnetics for concern of surface issues where the card could be scratched in the magnetic?
Never ship a card in a magnetic to be slabbed. One, the card rattles around like a baby rattle, and I think the card could be affected. I would just take it out, get the surface clean, put it in a card saver 1 or a top loader. If you do use a top loader, that's what I've been using recently. Make sure to tape it shut, or you run the risk of the card coming out of the top loader. So I think just be safe when you're sending your cards off because they are going across the country.
Yeah, and you should always tape the top loaders if you use them, and more so, and I think you've shown this in a video before, Nolan, you want to press down the top loader and tape it, so top loader together. I got a card the other day in a PWE, and the guy like slapped the tape on it, and the card was taped to the like
Yep,
it taped the
happens
card, and I
all the
was like,
time.
"What? You're
So
like,
they
why are you doing
took the
that,
first
buddy?"
step, but the second step is the pinch and tape. You got to pinch and then tape.
Yeah, for sure. You want to keep the card from moving, not just prevent the card from falling out of the holder. But yeah, I wouldn't send cards in magnetics. I mean, I keep stuff in magnetics sometimes. I have some cards in there, but not a crazy amount. But I've never shipped a card in magnetic. I still use the card saver method with PSA, but you certainly obviously don't have to do that. Rivenwood wants to know, is the hobby like a game of hot potato? Someone will be left holding the bag when the hobby dies out. I mean, you can speak to this first if you want, Nolan.
Say that question again.
He says, is the hobby like a game of hot potato? Someone will be left to hold the bag when the hobby dies out.
I mean, I don't know exactly where this question's going, but I don't see the hobby dying out. If he's talking about like a player that you've bought too much of and you're left with all the cards, like that's me and Robert Griffin. I still hold about 50 of his slab cards in my store. I sell maybe 3 a year, so in about 30 years I'll have those all sold. But I think the hobby's here to stay. I mean, guys, products have been pumped out for the last, even after the junk wax era. And let's think of all the products that have come out in the last 16 years or 20 years even. I mean, it's not going anywhere. There's always going to be people watching baseball and wanting to break products. I think sites like Breakers TV offers people to get in on cases and group breaks, and it's just that to me the hobby seems strong. All the cards listed, all the people collecting, all the people that attend the national. I think it's as strong as ever.
Yeah, there's no doubt. This is a hobby that's been around for a long time. I mean, they started making cards in general in the late 1800s. It became more mainstream in the 1940s, 1950s, and it's been going ever since. There's going to be ups and downs like with anything, but I've seen a resurgence in the hobby. I've seen more people interested in the hobby. I think it can depend on who's involved in the hobby, what there is to offer. I think the amount of young players in baseball specifically has drawn an increased interest. I think hot players like an Aaron Judge, like an Ohtani, I think get people's attention. I just personally know a lot of people who used to collect like when they were younger and they haven't done it in a while, and they know I'm into it, and they've approached me, like just friends of mine who probably don't even know I have YouTube channels or doing a podcast at this point, but like they'll approach me and start talking about it, like, hey, do you still do this? I've been getting into it a little bit, or maybe they have kids that are getting into it. So I think the hobby's growing again. I don't think it'll ever end, but I'm sure at some point things might tail off for a little while, but I think at some point people will be back on it. Christopher's Cool Cards wants to know how many years we've collected. I probably started collecting when I was like 8, so I don't know, 28 years if I can do math, something like that. Off and on at points and times, but pretty strong for a while.
See, I started collecting in 1989, so I was about 5, and that was just Donruss stuff.
Bob Lewis wants to know our thoughts on how induction or potential induction to the Hall of Fame can affect a player's interest in the hobby.
I think there is going to be a spike, not a crazy spike there. I mean, as I think right before Vlad does his speech, maybe his stuff will go up 10 or 20%, but I don't think it's like this crazy market change that people always talk about when they go to the Hall of Fame, because if you think about it, people already know he's getting in. There's players that are still in the majors now. Like, we know that Beltre is going to get in, and does that cause his cards to just go crazy? No. So, I think there's a little room, but I don't, like, when Griffey got inducted in 2016, his cards went up a little bit, but they've just dropped back right to where they were before.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a spike in interest, even if it's temporary. I think it can depend player to player as well. I think the spike is more in during a point of a guy's career. At a certain point, people start to realize a guy's gonna be a Hall of Famer, and that's where I think you see interest will grow. I think that happened with Beltre a few years ago. I think his stuff was, fairly cheap. And then at a certain point, people went, oh, this guy's going to achieve this, this, and this. And it kind of snowballed from there. And now his Chrome rookies have elevated a bit. So I think that's more where it happens. I have seen an increase overall in Jim Thome over the last few years as well. I mean, he's a guy who was putting up the numbers for a while, but I think his stuff, specifically his rookies, his Bowman rookie, definitely were affected in a positive way. But at this point now, I think they're at the price they're going to be. I mean, I'm sure extra people will purchase those cards right around induction time, but like you said, it's a temporary bump. But being a Hall of Famer certainly increases the people's desire to collect your cards for sure, but that happens over the course of years.
Yeah, I think that like the next wave of collectors here in like 20 years, when they're told about Thome and Vlad, and they didn't see him play, I think that's when you get some more people hopping on the bandwagon. Like me, I never saw Mano play live, but I'm only 33, but I collect his cards. So I think that's what's cool about baseball and Hall of Famers.
And then Bob also wants to know opinions on set registries, how they've changed the hobby, and certainly the PSA ones have changed the hobby a bit. They've added some increased interest, and there's only a small percentage of people who slab cards, and there's a smaller percentage of people in the hobby that are involved in set registries. But those people who are generally very competitive, and they're looking to add to their registries. So it's certainly helped with different players, different sports. I think that's where you've seen an increase in interest in some ways for the Hall of Famers. And then you have the top 300 cards by Mike Payne. That's one of those where there's cards in that set that are, of Hall of Famers and legendary cards. And there's other cards that are a little silly, but they're kind of cool cards still. And probably no one would collect those cards, specifically graded, if they weren't in that book. So that book alone has increase the value of a bunch of cards that otherwise would be probably lost in the shuffle and forgotten.
Yeah, my thing with the PSA registry is I'm not going to go out of my way and spend money on cards that I don't like. Like, I'm not going to buy a Griffey card or a LeBron James card if I don't truly like the card. Like, I'm not just going to buy a 9 or a 10 just to get a better rating on the registry. It's got to be cards that I like, and then if I do happen to have a good rating, then that's good too. But I think it's just my opinion. You shouldn't buy cards you don't really like just to get a higher move up on the registry. I think that's kind of weird.
Yeah, and I follow a lot of people who are in the set registries. The only one I've personally done is I started doing 1989 Topps Hall of Famers. And I mainly did it just to kind of get involved in the registries. And quite honestly, there's not a single card in that set that's probably more than like $20 as a PSA 10. And I like 89 Topps. It's a classic set to me. It's this first set that I was really involved in. So to me, it's more of a memory thing. But obviously, some of those registries are just off the charts expensive. But I just think it's another aspect to the hobby, and I think it's a positive one. So we have Henry S. He wants to know, how many binders do people have for their collection? He's closing on 80 or more, and that's an awful lot of binders. Me personally, I probably have I don't know. I might have 20. I'm not even sure. I didn't count them, but I think binders are a good thing. I did them when I was a kid, then I kind of got out of them, didn't really pay attention to them, and now I think it's a good way to display certain cards. I'm not going to keep super expensive cards or pristine cards in there, but I think it's a good way to kind of have some fun and either put players or teams together or just different cards from different years.
Yeah, I would say I've got about 25 to 30 binders right now, and it's, I don't put anything too expensive in them, but, like I have a Griffey one that I like to only put one card of, like, every card in there is unique. So there's not like 10 1990 Donrusses in there. There's just, and it's fun. It's you don't have to worry about grading and all that. You're just kind of putting cards in pages and flipping through them later on. So it's definitely a fun part of the hobby.
And it's definitely an easy way to enjoy the cards, to just, like you said, just kind of flip through. And you can either do that on your own and just look at it and reminisce. about baseball or the hobby or just looking at the cards. And it's a good way to kind of share it with other people from time to time when that opportunity, should that arise. It's a great way to be like, hey, check these out. And you can kind of spread the word about the hobby a little bit. But we just have a few more here real quick. Yankees Win wants to know, if you had to choose between modern and vintage, what would you choose and why? I think it's hard to choose one or the other.
Oh man.
I certainly have way more modern than vintage. I would like to add more vintage to the collection for sure, but they all have their aspects.
I mean, I don't know if I can even answer that because I'd be so sad to give up modern or vintage. God, I don't know. I'd probably stay with the modern just because I could track players that are still playing, and that's the only reason. But I have so much fun with the vintage, and I wouldn't want to give up either. But if I had to, that's kind of what I would probably do.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I think
it'd be a sad day.
modern cards are what you and I, they're the players we've grown up and are currently watching. The vintage is more like the fairy tale guys, the guys we've heard of from um, relatives or through the people
Totally.
talking about the history of baseball. So it's really cool, and it'll be interesting to see what the thought process is for people 50 years from now, because at that point, like, you're still going to hear about some of those guys that played back in the 50s and stuff, but I don't know. There won't be people to talk about how they watched them. Right now, you have still people around who are like, I remember watching this guy. I remember going and seeing Sandy Koufax pitch. So, be interesting. He wants to know any advice for getting into vintage. Would you choose a specific set registry or just pick up players you enjoy? And my opinion is, you just start by picking up guys you enjoy, teams you enjoy. I mean, I'm working on a project. I just have a couple more cards I need. I'm putting together every Phillies base tops card they've ever put out from 1951 through 2018. I think it's a real fun binder project. So, that's how I kind of started. I have a few vintage cards. I don't have as much as I'd like. I do want to pick up a few Ted Williams cards. So it's just, obviously a great player I like. But I think you just start by picking up players or teams or just cards in general that appeal to you. I don't think you have to force yourself into some certain registry.
No, you don't have to do that, and you don't have to buy the PSA sevens or eights or the vintage either because they're so expensive. I mean, I own some PSA threes that I love because the card looks great still, and it's not even close to mint. But grab some threes, some fours, some fives, and just have fun with it. Check the market, try to get decent deals, and just enjoy the hobby.
Yeah, it's all about what the card kind of looks like, what the appeal is. I mean, I agree with your statement
Yeah,
there. I mean, I wanted to pick up a Jackie Robinson, and then my local card shop, a couple times a year, they run an auction, and they had a Reggie Jackson or not Reggie Jackson, Jackie Robinson. I forget offhand. I think it was a 54. 54 or 56. I don't know. I forget offhand right now, but it had a tear in it. Like, it had a piece of the card missing on the bottom, but it still looked cool. It had a history to it. And I got it for like $10. And I sent
that's
it into
great.
PSA just to get it slabbed. I just said, just want this authenticated. I have it slabbed as authentic. And it's like, who cares? Like, I'm like the opposite. I know a lot of people are crazy into the condition of the vintage. To me, the modern stuff, I want perfect because it should be perfect because it's brand new. The vintage stuff, it's going to show where it's been loved. They were used as toys, played with. Obviously, I don't want one where a kid drew a mustache on Mickey Mantle, and I'd rather not have scribble on it. And, I like to avoid certain things. To me, with vintage, and this is just my personal opinion, I actually care most about the centering. I hate when cards are crazy miscut. I personally don't even care if the corners are round it to a degree. It just doesn't bother me if it's a 60-year-old card. So if I can get it at a great price, I still think it could be a nice addition to the collection. And as you mentioned, Nolan, you can get threes and they can look really good. They're not going to be
Totally.
perfect, but that's what happens when a card bounces around and isn't protected, when it comes out, 50 years before top loaders or soft sleeves or even a thought. And then our final question is from James Wong, who wants to know if exclusive licenses will ever go away. I don't know your thoughts, Nolan, but I would say no way.
I'm kind of the optimist, and I kind of would think that possibly. But I think the way things are set up now, I think it's going to be this way for a while. I don't know how much longer Topps has the baseball license, but they've had it for a while now, and that's the way it is now in the hobby. You know, I try to just take the positives out of it. Like, each company does make solid products, and you just have to try to enjoy those products. Obviously, I miss like SP Authentic Football. I think those cards were amazing, but as a collector, there's nothing you can do about it but just buy the older ones and think about days where you had 6-7 companies making cards. It doesn't mean they all made good cards, but it was nice to have different things to choose from.
Yeah, it was absolutely nice to have the choice and the competition. And Upper Deck certainly made some great stuff over the years. I mean, I would love to see it come back and be that way. I'm not saying we need 7 or 8 companies, but to have Upper Deck, Panini, Topps all competing would be really nice. I just don't see it happening. I think Topps has it. They either have it through 2019 or 2020, so their deal runs out sooner rather than later. I know there's been a lot of talk, if you kind of read between the lines, about Topps potentially being up, that putting that division of the company up for sale. So we'll see if someone else is going to end up buying Topps. If that's just not going to happen, you know, there's an outside chance Panini would certainly be a candidate. So we'll see what the future holds for sports cards. I personally doubt it's going to go back to kind of a free-for-all, but again, you never know. I'd love to see it return to the older days, but we'll see. So our last comment, there's no question here, but we'll give a shout out to a buddy of both of ours, Eastern Connecticut Sports Cards. Just said he can't wait to hear us. 2 of his favorite dudes. So a little compliment there from our buddy Michael.
Thanks, man.
Definitely appreciate it, Mike. I've enjoyed his channel. I'm happy to see him continue to make content. Nolan, it's been a pleasure. This has been quite a long episode. We went a little over that hour I mentioned, but it was a lot of fun.
I think we went close to 2 hours, so that was pretty epic.
Yeah, it was a long episode, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode. As always, you can listen for free on SoundCloud. You can download for free on iTunes. You can check it out on YouTube. Feel free to share the podcast to other collectors out there. Feel free to give some feedback and comments and all that stuff. Really appreciate everyone listening and appreciate Nolan joining me today. Check out his eBay store. Check out his YouTube channel, Eliteco3. You will learn a lot about the hobby, and it's just a lot of great content. So again, Nolan, appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on today.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Talk to you next time.